The book of Ruth opens up with what we would call a setting verse. This is a verse that helps you understand not only the time period for which the events that are recorded in the book of Ruth take place, but it also helps you understand kind of the attitude and kind of what's going on in the nation of Israel at that time. So I'm going to read this really quickly. It's just an excerpt from Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. It says this: in the days when the judges ruled in Israel. If you go back in Israel's history, in Genesis chapter 12, the very first book of the Bible, the formation of the nation of Israel, God is speaking to Abraham, the very first Israelite. He's the beginning of the nation of Israel. God makes a covenant with Abraham that includes a few things, but one of the things that it includes is a promised land. Don't forget that. It's going to come back up later. At the end of the book of Genesis, the nation of Israel, if you will, is very small. It's Jacob, who is one of Abraham's descendants, and Jacob's 12 sons and their families. That's the entire nation of Israel, just those 13 families. That's it. By the time the book of Exodus opens up, though, a few hundred years have passed and the nation of Israel has swollen to well over 1 million people. All of a sudden, this is not just a small group of people who God can just directly lead, but instead this nation needs a leader. It needs someone who speaks on behalf of God to the people. And so God selects a man, and his name is Moses. And he begins to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt in the book of Exodus. By the end of the book of Exodus, a few million Israelites leave Egypt under Moses' leadership. As they leave Egypt, God leads them into what's called the wilderness. In the wilderness, God shapes them into the nation that he desires for them to be. He gives them the law in the book of Leviticus. And in the book of Numbers, he gives them account of themselves and an identity as a nation. And then in Deuteronomy, Moses gives his final instruction to the people of Israel. Essentially, it's a pleading from Moses for the people of Israel to obey God. Do what God says. Don't disobey God is essentially the entire essence of the book of Deuteronomy. Then Deuteronomy ends, and what it ends with is the death of Israel's first great leader, Moses. Moses dies on the very edge of what's called the Promised Land, that land that God promised Abraham all the way back in Genesis chapter 12. We have fought 5 books to get here, and we're finally here. At the end of Deuteronomy, we are standing on the banks of the Promised Land, about to enter. Moses passes away and a new leader takes over Israel. His name is Joshua. Joshua takes over the reins that Moses leaves behind, and Joshua leads the people of Israel into what's called the Promised Land. There's only one problem. There's some people who already live there. There's people who already have inhabited the Promised Land. And God gives Joshua some very harsh and very specific instruction. God says, these people who currently inhabit the land that you have been promised, they are idol worshipers, child sacrificers. They are not good people. They have had an opportunity, many opportunities, to turn from their wicked ways, and yet every time they've had an opportunity to do something good, they have chosen to do something bad. It is time to wipe these people off of the face of the planet. This is your promised land, but on your way in, you must dismantle and destroy all the people that you come across. Israel decides they're not going to do this. Basically, they decide to act in open rebellion to the command of God, and they're going to do what they want to do. Instead of destroying the people who live there, they make treaties with them, peace treaties. Instead of destroying the people who live there, they intermarry with these people, something God specifically commands them not to do, and yet they do it anyway. At the end of the book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, Joshua gives a charge to the people of Israel. And essentially this charge is very simple. Joshua says to the people, you're either going to do what God tells you to do, or you're going to do what you want to do. But if you choose to do what you want to do, you're going to suffer the consequences of that choice. And then Joshua's book ends. And with his book ending, his leadership ends. And it's time for a new leader in Israel. But this time we don't have a singular leader like Moses or Joshua. Instead, the next book in the Bible is the book of Judges. Now you go, wait a minute, how does Judges change? What happens there? Well, essentially what happens is that instead of appointing a new leader to try and convince Israel to do the right thing like Moses and Joshua did, God allows the people of Israel to make a choice and to suffer the consequences of the very choice that they make. They have a choice to whether they will listen to God and do what he says, or they will disobey him and they will suffer the consequences. Sadly, in the book of Judges, we see the people of Israel choose to disobey God. They don't listen to him. They don't destroy the people who live in the promised land. They intermingle, intermarry, and make peace treaties with these people. And because of that, God removes his hand of protection. The hand that's been protecting Israel all through Exodus, all through Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, God removes that hand. And the people of Israel now are free to make their own decision and suffer the consequences of the very decisions that they make. Sadly, in the book of Judges, you see the people of Israel do this 7 times. 7 different times they walk away from God. When they walk away from God, God removes his hand of protection. Foreign invaders demolish Israel. And when they finally get brought all the way to their knees and their idol worship has strung them out completely dry, finally the people of Israel call out to God, God, please help us. And when they call out to God, God in his infinite grace and his infinite love, he sends a judge. And the judge frees the people of Israel from their captors, typically through a military victory. And then the judge points them back to God. He says, hey, the reason you were in this mess is because you chose to disobey what God told you to do. And because you disobeyed, you're suffering the consequences. Oh, please stop doing that. Choose to obey God and you'll no longer suffer. But 7 times in a row, we see the people of Israel fall away from God, fall into captors' hands, call out to God for help. God rescues them through a judge. And for 15 minutes, they worship him. But then 15 minutes later, they fall right back into idol worship, right back in the hands of their captors, right back into this. It's a cycle. It happens 7 times in the book. And the book of Ruth is helping you understand that this is the nation with which, this is the time period with which the book of Ruth takes place. It's taking place in a time when the people of Israel have no king. The people of Israel have no leader. They're no longer making the decision to follow God. The people of Israel are instead choosing to walk away from God, and they are suffering the consequences of that decision. This is the backdrop for which the book of Ruth takes place, which makes the decisions and the different things that happen in the book of Ruth even more impactful. I pray this intro has helped you to the book of Ruth. If you have questions, as always, please leave us a comment. We'd love to chat with you about it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.